Now the Prime Minister is on the offensive again this morning with a warning that state pensions, NHS spending and even free bus passes could be put at risk if Britain votes to leave the European Union. In fact, even Samantha Cameron is joining in the action, urging voters to trust her husband's judgment. Well, I'm joined now by Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Liberal Democrat leader. He is, of course, remains firmly in the Remain camp, I suspect. And here we are. Very good morning to you, Nick Clegg. Here we are a year and a bit after all that damage being in coalition with Mr Cameron did to your party. Here you are campaigning with him again.
Well, I've always believed all my life, all my political life, and I will continue to, that if we as a country want to make sense of the world we inhabit, it's best doing that hand in glove with our European neighbours. I just don't think you gain very much by sort of turning your back on the world. We live in an era of globalization, from climate change to cross-border crime to economic, financial flows around the world. The stuff that we can get done together that we can't possibly do apart. It was a very similar argument made, of course, at the time of the Scottish referendum, and it's an argument that I will make, regardless of who my fellow travellers are.
But I suppose it's a little bit about the campaigning. There's a lot of discussion about, the strange bedfellows on all sides that this European referendum has caused. And there you are, as I say, a lot of damage. You've accepted that cost to your party by the sacrifices you say you made to join that coalition for 5 years. There you are campaigning hand in glove with Mr Cameron once again. That causes your party damage, isn't it? And other parties, I want to ask you about, other parties are refusing to do that.
Well, look, there's the SNP, the Greens, there's large parts of the Conservatives, there's Labour, there's the Liberal Democrats. I honestly don't think, or at least I hope, when people decide where to put their cross on that all-important ballot paper on the 23rd of June, and all the clichés that have been applied to this vote are true. It is immeasurably more important than any other election that certainly my generation would ever experience. I hope people won't actually think about this politician or that politician or this party or that party. They'll think about their country and particularly the future of and indeed whether our country will have a future at all, because as Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon have put us on notice, if we were to pull out of the European Union, there's a strong chance that they'll then succeed in their ambition in yanking Scotland out of what remains of the United Kingdom. So I hope in these final frenetic stages of the referendum campaign, people will focus on the bigger picture. There's been lots of claims and counterclaims and statistics and counter-statistics, but in my view there are certain basic underlying truths which don't change, which is that there is safety in numbers in an uncertain world, which we gain by being part of this European club, flawed though it undoubtedly is.
But in those parties that don't like the Conservatives, and your party is one of the many members who, of course, don't like the Conservatives, of course they don't, are there people you think who are going to say, we're not going to vote because Mr Cameron, it's too
Well, I certainly think a lot of people, I was out and about the last several days in my own constituency in South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, and there are lots of people who they're fed up to the back teeth with George versus Boris versus Michael versus Dave, all these former friends who've now fallen out spectacularly with each other. Do you know, my answer is, I don't care who runs the Conservative Party. This, in my view, the last year has proved to be one of the most spectacularly dysfunctional governments in recent times. They're not governing for the country, they're just squabbling amongst themselves. I care passionately about the country I love, and I just think more and more people are realising that actually this goes way beyond this silly, petty sort of playground drama between these Conservative rivals for the future leadership of their party. It's about us, it's about our nation.
But how do you deal with that core, I suppose, thinking from people in your party, as I say, in the Labour Party, in the SNP and so many other parties who are going to say, I am not going to go and vote. I never have voted. I've never agreed with anything David Cameron and anyone else has done. I'm not going to vote that way. If he's telling me to do it, I'm going to do the opposite.
And if you're a Lib Dem, agree with the Lib Dems who think you should vote. Or if you're a Labour, agree with Jeremy Corbyn. Or agree if you believe with what Caroline Lucas and Natalie Bennett are saying. Certainly the people I speak to recognise that this is unlike a partisan election. The things that you need to ask yourself is, do you think the country's going to be safer, stronger, better off, in or out? Now, look, my view is and remains that the risks of leaving far outweigh the inconveniences of staying. Of course there are inconveniences of staying. There are flaws in Westminster and Whitehall as well, but we don't respond to the flaws in our own political system by sort of raising it to the ground and walking off. You work and work again to make it better, which is what the United Kingdom can and must do.
But isn't the problem, though, your visions, and there are multiple visions of what's in looks like for the future.
Sure.
I mean, you differ. We know for a fact you differ comprehensively with the Prime Minister's vision of Britain in Europe. You think that immigration is wholly a good thing, or by and large a good thing for the United Kingdom. I mean, do you still think eventually we might join the euro?
No, I don't think so, actually. And I think the way that the euro was established, none of us could have told at the time, was a really botched job, and we shouldn't join it now. But look, actually, it's not quite the right characterisation of immigration. But setting that aside for a moment, you're right. Of course, there are different sort of areas of emphasis. I probably care more about the European Union's capacity, for instance, to deal with climate change than the Conservatives traditionally do. Jeremy Corbyn cares more about workers' rights than Conservatives do. But those differences are nothing compared to the differences in the Brexit camp. And this is astonishing. They're asking us to take the most momentous decision this country, this leap into the dark, that this country would have done for generations, and they can't even agree amongst themselves what happens on the 24th of June. It beggars belief. It's a great sort of contrick. They keep promising us this world of milk and honey if we were to leave the European Union. I think a lot of people would feel very, very betrayed if they voted for Brexit and they then discover that the leaders of the Brexit campaign don't know what happens next, and that actually we would be poorer, we wouldn't have more money, and we would have less money to spend on the NHS.
People don't really know what happens next, and you can't tell us what happens next if the vote is Remain. You know, there's the theory that then goes the European Union shuts the door, say, right, you've had your vote, you're certainly not having another, and we can do what we like to you.
No, I don't think that certainly won't happen, because, of course, our rights as one of the biggest and strongest members of the European Union are retained. Of course, my crystal ball is no clearer than anybody else's, that the European Union will evolve. But one thing I do know is that the European Union single market will remain by far our most important marketplace for our exports on our doorstep. I do know that you cannot keep our streets safe from international crime, the tentacles of which reach into every community in our country other than working with our partners in the European Union. I do know that we won't be able to deal with the mass movement of people across the European continent without working with the countries in that continent, so flawed though it definitely is, and though it desperately needs to be reformed in certain respects. I think that that compares favourably to the huge uncertainties of a Brexit campaign that doesn't even know whether it wants to be Albania or Norway or Switzerland or Canada. I still don't know what their future...
But what about those people, and the polls tell us there's so many people uncertain, not decided and unclear about all the facts, and saying, well, OK, I'm maybe listening to Nick Clegg here and agreeing with a lot of what he says, but, aren't the Remain side overdoing it? And here we've got the Prime Minister again today saying, could affect pensions, the NHS, and indeed free bus passes might go. I mean, that is Project Fear.
Well, I'll come in a minute. I think the problem is we have Project Fear on one hand and Project Fib on the other. I mean, it's an absolute massive sort of contrick, the Brexit lot. But I agree with you that some of the Remain, even though I'm a Remain campaigner, some of the claims they've made have a sort of specious precision to them. They predict exactly what in 20 years' time would be the state of your household budget. Of course, the precision of those figures can be overdone. I so happen to think, however, that what the Prime Minister appears to be saying today is flamingly obvious. If you make yourself poorer, you have less money to spend on the things that you want, schools, pensions, defence and so on. So you need to make some very difficult choices if you have less money to go around. That seems to me to be stating actually the obvious. But yes, of course there is, and I've certainly met a lot of people, as you imply, who are getting pretty sick to the back teeth with all these claims and counterclaims. So at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself not just what you feel about Brussels today, but what do you think is right for our country and future generations, given that we live in an era of globalisation, given that I cannot envisage of a single challenge which will face my small children and indeed future generations, whether it's climate change, crime, globalisation, international trade talks, where we are not stronger together in the European Union as opposed to being weaker, isolated in the past.
Just tell me your take on the Leave side, and making great headway, it seems, in the polls and raising immigration. And Nigel Farage, I mean, do you think? I mean, let's cut to the point. Do you think he's been racist, borderline racist?
Oh, I think he's got a very sort of nasty, slightly sort of vindictive view of things. He's like populists everywhere. You see Trump, Le Pen, Geert Wilders. I mean, in a sense, he's in good company. There are populists now and chauvinists and particularly nationalists across the developed world. And what they do is they take people's fears, and people are very fearful. I understand that. There's a lot to be fearful and indeed angry about these days. And then they say, we can solve all of those problems. Trump says all he needs to do is build a wall to keep the Mexicans out, and everybody's problems will go. Farage says just put that cross on that Brexit choice, and all the problems will go. And that's what I find so dishonest about Nigel Farage and indeed other sort of populists across the developed world at the moment, is they take complex problems and then they fool people into thinking that they have simple solutions. And do you know what? Most people, most of the time, know that sometimes it's not as simple as building a wall or simply sticking up two fingers to our neighbours across the channel.
What about that question about Jeremy Corbyn? Is he doing enough to mobilise his troops?
Well, look, I think, I'm stating the obvious. It'd be great if the Labour Party could just really get out there in a full-throated way and speak to the millions of people who voted for the Labour Party and leave no one in any doubt. Then they can make their own decisions, but no one should be in any doubt where the Labour Party stands. And some of the evidence recently is that some Labour supporters do not. Even in the depths of our electoral doldrums last year, we had 2.5 million people, 1 million more than voted for the SNP, voted for the Liberal Democrats. I hope there isn't a single Liberal Democrat voter who's in any doubt that we believe that we should remain.
So the message is what? Hold your nose. Whatever you think about Cameron and the Conservatives, hold your nose. This is bigger than that.
Do what's right for the country. Forget the Conservatives if you're a non-Conservative voter.